when I was writing my 20 Golden Rules, I wrote my first book, Eat Less, Live Long, which was about my journey to get well, and also about the longest lived cultures, those 10 centenarian cultures, and about fasting. So it was about those three things. And when I wrote my first book, I'd actually written about 20 books, but the publisher said, oh, look, you're crazy. You just got to put this first 3 chapters out. And the first 3 chapters is Eat Less, Live Long. So that turned into a book, you know. So I've got a lot of other books pre-written. And so after the first book came out, people were saying to me, I love your fasting. You've taught me how to fast. I'm now fasting regularly. I feel so good. What are the other things that matter? And that's why I wrote the 20 Golden Rules, because I wanted to kind of sum up, okay, what are the 20 things that I think are most important? And fasting's one of them. The 20th one is find your happy paradigm. And what happy stands for me is, number one is home. So the H in happy stands for home. So you've got to have a home. If you want to be happy and resilient, you must have a safe place you can go to. You know, human beings, when we evolved from animals, we found a cave. We found somewhere where no matter what was happening, we had somewhere to go. Even if you're traveling, you've got a van, right?
I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, so, you know, if you're traveling, you got a van, you know, and a van is great. And so that's your home, you know, or you might find a place to stay for a while. But the first thing for human beings, they need somewhere to feel safe. So you take away the pyramid of needs, the hierarchy of needs that human beings have psychologically. Number one is you've got to feel safe. Mm-hmm. So number one is home, happy is for home. A is for attitude. If you want to get anywhere in life, if you want to be happy, you have to change your attitude. And attitude is everything, because attitude, you know, determines your latitude, and, you know, we know all the cliched sayings around it. But it's true, you know, if you want to learn, I thought about it, and I thought, you know what, those men that come to my seminars, and sometimes, and you and I were talking about this earlier, I sometimes have 300 people in a room, 280 of them are women, and you know, there's 20 men there, and of those 20 men, 10 of them were dragged there from their wives, you know, because their wives are more in tune with health and longevity and their skin health, and they want to learn more. They've got more of an open mind about food. The men are kind of grumbling away, you know, but they love it because it's a male presenting, and I'm a male, so they like that rather than a female, because men kind of go, oh, good, it's good, hear a male talk about health. And so I have a way of connecting. I have a way of connecting with men that is different because I'm a male, right? And then you got those other 10 men who are there because they survived a heart attack. But I always acknowledge those men in the room, and I always say, you know, I've got to acknowledge the men in the room here tonight, because you had the attitude to come here. And before you learn anything, you have to have the attitude that I don't know. And most of us are hardwired to be, I know it all. And we're like, I know it all. I know everything. I know. Don't tell me what to do. Defensive, you know, protect your identity at all costs. So to me, attitude is so important. You know, to even be listening to this podcast, you have to have the attitude that I want to be healthy, or I'm interested, or I don't know enough about it. Then you've got to search online to find it. Then you've got to go and push play on the podcast. Then you've got to give yourself time to listen to it. So anyone listening to this podcast has already had a quantum shift in attitude. You know, so attitude is so important. Getting well, staying well, whether it's mentally or physically. I'm going to eat more plants. I'm going to dye all my clothes yellow because yellow might help me with my asthma for some crazy reason. You know, I read in a book once that, you know, the yellow was the colour for asthmatics. So I dyed all my clothes yellow for a year. And when I was curing my asthma, you know, I painted my shoes yellow. All I wore was yellow for a whole year, you know. Now, I don't know whether that helped my asthma or not, you know, when I was getting well. But it showed my attitude. My attitude was, okay, whatever it takes to get well, I'm going to do it. Exactly. So I did everything I read. Every book I could read, I would do it. If it said enemas, great, I did enemas. If it said fasting, great, I did that. If it said wheatgrass, great, I grew 31 trays of wheatgrass, and I hand chopped a tray every day and juiced it by hand every day and drank it every day, you know, whatever it took to get well. And so attitude is the A. First P is philosophy. And what you find with the happiest cultures in the world is they all have a unifying philosophy. You know, for some people that's religion. For some people that's a spirituality of some sort. For some people it's a set of rules in the community. You know, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not love thy neighbour's wife, whatever it is. You know, there's a shared philosophy that seems to work for human beings to create happiness. So knowing where you stand, you know, you've got your safety of your cave, you've got an inquisitive mind, and you've changed your attitude, and then knowing where you stand in your community is really important. So philosophy is really important, whatever that is. You know, I've got my own 5 values that I live my life out of, and we can talk about that if we get some time. But they give me my happiness, my joy, my self-expression in the world, and everything I do comes out of those 5 values. The second P in happy is proactivity. So be proactive. You know, don't sit back and wait for life to hit you. It's so important. If you want the perfect job, if you want the perfect spouse, if you want the perfect whatever, Go out and put effort into it. Don't wait for it to hit you, because you will wake up one day at 80, a miserable old so-and-so, complaining about your life. And then the last one, the why, out of happy, is that you matter. And I've had seminars when I've distinguished the happy paradigm, and I say, look, I want everyone here to know that you matter. You matter in your community. And I've had people spontaneously burst into tears because they've never been told in their life that they matter. And they've never been told they contribute. And everybody does, because everyone lives in a community. When you live in a community, you contribute. So you matter is really important. And so there's a whole area about contribution there that is so fundamentally important for human beings that I think is just critical. So, you need a home, you need a good attitude, you need a philosophy to live your life by, you need to be proactive in the things that make you happy, and you need to understand that you contribute. And then, if you don't think you do, well, get on with contributing then, because contribute builds resilience in the brain. So, those are the things I think that are really important. And that leads us to, when you look at those things, it leads us to vulnerability. And vulnerability and honesty for a lot of people are so scary. They're such scary things, to be vulnerable that I don't have it handled, or I don't know the answers, or I'm lost, or I'm scared. For most people, is just the scariest thing to admit. And yet vulnerability, to change, you need to be vulnerable, because before you change behavior or change the way you think, you've got to acknowledge something's not working. So you've got to be vulnerable and go, you know what? Something's not working in my life. I drink every night. I can't get through a day without drinking. Okay, I've either got an alcohol addiction problem or I'm an alcoholic. Okay, I don't want to admit that, but that's what's going on if that's the case. So then you go to an AA meeting, or you go to a doctor or a friend, you tell someone, but being vulnerable is the first step, because the person might go, forget about it, man, alcohol's good, we all drink a bit, don't worry about it, have a beer. So it could go really wrong. Being vulnerable is scary, because you open yourself up to change. And behavior change is, when I find working with people, the biggest thing that gets in the way for people from getting well, whether it's mentally well or physically well, is they won't change behavior. And behavior creates everything, because it's what you do in the world that actually leaves the legacy behind. It's not what you say. I could say right now, I'm Mickey Mouse, but am I? You're
Jason Shon Bennett.
Exactly. Nice. Yes, but I'm not Mickey Mouse, right? I could say that, but there's no integrity in that, right? But if I say I'm Jason Shon Bennett and these are my values, this is what I do, and then you watched how I live my life, you'd see, his values match up with his integrity and his honesty, and that's what he does. And if you're a mass murderer and you say I'm a mass murderer, then that's integrity, because you are saying what you are and what you do in the world. So integrity is not about good or bad. It's about your word matching the world, and you saying what's going to happen before it happens. That's what integrity really is. Honesty is reporting on the world. So honesty is me saying, for example, this is a pillow. That's me being honest, right? But integrity is me saying, tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., I'm going to be doing push-ups here in yoga. I'm going to pick up this pillow and I'm going to use it to lie on. And if you came back at 6 a.m. and saw me doing my push-ups and my yoga and leaning on the pillow, that's integrity, because I said it before it happened and the world matched my word. So I'm kind of rambling a bit here, but it's such a fundamental part of our behavior is integrity and honesty and doing what you say, and that also creates happiness in the brain. So courage, honesty, vulnerability leads to happiness. You can't leave a job that you're unhappy at without having an attitude about it, without changing your behavior, called walking out the door and quitting. You can't go for your dream or go for the person you want to be with without having a behavior change. You have to be vulnerable. So behavior change is all mixed in with vulnerability, and vulnerability seems to be one of those things that's so scary for people. The fear of deep shame is so strong in people. And we've tied up shame with so many things in Western society, which shouldn't be tied up with it. Men crying, and I burst into tears all the time. My brother, my only brother, was killed when I was 17, and my best friend died when I was 33. I've had 5 best friends die of car crashes and drugs and cancer. At one stage, I had for 10 years, I had 1 or 2 of my closest friends in the world all die one after another. It was phenomenal, And so I cry all the time. I'm so in touch with grief, because I've been through so many funerals and so much grief in my time, and for such a young man as well. So the things set me off. I'll hear a song that reminds me of my brother. I'll just burst into tears. I might be on stage and that level of vulnerability takes a lot to get to, because you've got to be comfortable with people seeing you broken, and most of us are not. So I think that's also a huge part of mental wellness as well. And going back to that question that you asked much earlier on in this, which was about New Zealand. We have this kind of buff I'm tough.
But really it's blocking it, eh?
It's blocking it, yeah. Usually the harder the outside, the softer the inside, I tend to find with human beings. So the more tough the person is on the outside, the more jellyfish they are on the inside, you know. And you just got to get through to the jelly, you know, which is always yummy, but, you know.